Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. Over the years I've discussed hundreds, if not thousands of theories about the wizarding world at large. I try to challenge aspects of the story, within reason, and build arguments to convince you that these theories hold merit. However, there is also a time and a place for shock value, and I think it's safe to say that the theories contained in today's video are some of the most shocking to date. That's not to say that they don't make sense, many of them are still plausible, but their disturbing, creepy nature is a common theme. Join me today as we unpack 5 of the wizarding world's most disturbing theories, exploring the unsettling ideas that add a whole new dimension to the magical world we all know and love. Lavender Brown's dark side. In case you can't remember, Lavender Brown was a pure-blood witch who started at Hogwarts in the same year as Harry, Ron, and Hermione. She was actually the first new sorted Gryffindor of her year, and for years, Lavender attended Hogwarts alongside the trio, even sharing a dormitory with Hermione. However, there was never much attention placed on her until the 6th installment of the series, when her character really blossomed. You see, it was in her 6th year that Lavender developed an unusual infatuation with Ron Weasley. During this particular school year, she began showering him with compliments and flirtatious gestures, which Ron seemed to enjoy. Eventually, their relationship took a romantic turn after Ron had a falling out with Hermione. Throughout their 2-month relationship, Lavender exhibited intense affection and possessiveness towards Ron, going as far as calling him One and giving him a Christmas necklace labeled Sweetheart. However, following the holidays, their relationship started to deteriorate. Following his poisoning, Ron starts pulling away from her, pretending to be asleep when she visits him in the hospital wing and avoiding her affections. Eventually, Ron reconciles with Hermione, leading Lavender to suspect a connection between them. After witnessing Ron and Hermione seemingly leaving together, she decides to end their relationship. But here's where it gets juicy. One popular theory online is that Ron was never genuinely interested in Lavender at all, and that all of the affection directed towards her was actually the result of a love potion like amortentia. The theory posits that Lavender gave Ron the potion prior to and for the duration of their relationship. However, because she was unable to give him the potion during his stint in hospital, it eventually wore off and he grew to dislike her. This could explain Ron's sudden interest in Lavender, as well as his sudden disinterest in her. And this certainly wouldn't be the first time that we've heard of love potions being used in the story. Voldemort's mother famously uses a love potion on his father, Tom Riddle Sr., and during Harry's time at Hogwarts, a fellow student named Romilda Vane plotted to use one of the potions on Harry himself. During Christmas of the same year, when Harry was invited to Professor Slughorn's lavish Christmas party, Romilda plotted with her friends in the girls' bathroom to somehow give Harry a love potion from Weasley's Wizard Wheezers. In March of the same year, Harry accidentally drops love potion-spiked chocolate cauldrons given to him by Romina on the floor while looking for the Marauders map. Ron, thinking they are a birthday present, eats them and becomes infatuated with Romilda. He professes his love for her in front of Harry, gets into a physical altercation with him, and tries to force his way into Slughorn's office, believing Romilda is inside. However, Horace Slughorn eventually intervenes and gives Ron an antidote, which he believes to be a tonic for the nerves, and the potion's effects wear off. If Romilda Vane was willing to do it, why not Lavender? Something was seriously wrong with the girls that year. There are a number of elements that help bolster this theory. First of all, love potions were easy to get. You could buy them at Weasley's Wizard Wheezers, no questions asked. The next thing worth examining is that despite Lavender flirting repeatedly with Ron, he only ever showed her a little bit of interest. A love potion could have been all she needed to get the chance with him that she felt she deserved. What's also important to consider is that Ron and Lavender first got together at the Quidditch party. At this party, there were a large number of drinks and many opportunities for her to spike Ron's butterbeer. The next indicator that Ron may have been given a love potion is the fact that his interest in Lavender seemed both sudden and superficial. It's well known that potions like amortentia cannot produce genuine love, only strong obsession or infatuation that mimics love. Given that Ron and Lavender are constantly engaged in PDA and show no real personal connection to one another, this could be a clue that this was the potion at work. The last clue the love potion may have been at play is the fact that Ron and Lavender break up after Slughorn gives him an antidote for the love potion that he unknowingly digested from Romilda Vane. It's possible that by curing Ron of Romilda's potion, Slughorn unknowingly gave Ron the antidote for Lavender's potion as well. It's been expressed that even Parvati Patil, Lavender's best friend, was uncomfortable with how unhealthy her obsession was toward Ron. Perhaps she knew more than she let on. Creepy. Lockhart's deepest secret. Gilderoy Lockhart had a lot of secrets, and one of his most significant secrets is that all of the heroic deeds and magical feats he boasts about are actually the achievements of other witches and wizards. He would interview these individuals, learn about their exploits, and then use powerful memory charms to erase their memories, allowing him to take credit for their accomplishments. To add insult to injury, he novelized these experiences. And what was his spell of choice to exploit these witches and wizards? Why, Obliviate, of course. After Lockhart was hired, many of the staff were baffled with the decision that Dumbledore had made. However, it's later revealed that Dumbledore strategically hired Lockhart. You see, Dumbledore knew that Lockhart was a fraud, or at least suspected it, and the following excerpt from Pottermore supports this. Albus Dumbledore's plans, however, ran deep. He happened to have known two of the wizards for whose life's work Gilderoy Lockhart had taken credit, and was one of the only people in the world who thought he knew what Lockhart was up to. Dumbledore wanted to put Lockhart in a position where he would effectively expose himself, because you see, talented wizard though he was, Lockhart had spent so many years perfecting memory charms that his ability in other aspects of magic was very unimpressive. And while Dumbledore's plan may have worked out in the end, with Lockhart eventually being exposed as a fraud, the following dark theory suggests that some of his students may have ended up as collateral damage in Lockhart's deepest secret of them all. Lockhart ended up teaching for one school year in the Chamber of Secrets, where he served as the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. But here's the thing, he was a profoundly bad teacher that was constantly revealing his own incompetence. He had little power or control in the classroom. But what power does a teacher have over his students? Why, the ability to place them in detention, of course. And here's the thing, detentions provided a perfect cover for Lockhart's manipulations. Under the guise of answering fan mail, he had students in a controlled environment where he could easily obliviate them, erasing any doubts they might have had about his abilities. This would leave students with a reinforced belief in his greatness, feeding Lockhart's insatiable ego and ensuring his fabricated stories went unchallenged. Any student that would challenge Lockhart would end up in this situation. Why? Well, I suspect that his primary goal here would be self-preservation, ensuring that any witnesses to his incompetence or inconsistencies couldn't expose him. His deep-seated narcissism and need for admiration drove him to manipulate students' memories in order to reinforce a false narrative of his greatness. But who knows what else he did before obliviating them. Voldemort's most twisted scheme. You know how Barty Crouch Jr. masquerades as Mad-Eye Moody for an entire book? And remember how during the Battle of the Seven Potters, most of the Order of the Phoenix used Polyjuice to transform into Harry? Both of these circumstances prove that, with a bit of Polyjuice potion, anything is possible. However, what you probably never expected to hear me say is that Voldemort once had a plan to impersonate Harry. Well, at least that's how the theory on Reddit goes. Redditor Mitch6 revealed the following theory. Voldemort's plan in GOF was to kill Harry in the maze and make Polyjuice, returning to the games as Harry. He'd decapitate Harry so he could keep making Polyjuice and inspire fear in the hearts of the Order by making them watch their chosen one and hero become a dark wizard as powerful and evil as Voldy, before finally revealing himself to the world with Harry's now bald and decaying skull. If it's unclear, the theory basically states this. After killing Harry in the maze, Voldemort intends to assume Harry's identity using Polyjuice potion. However, in order to ensure that he had a continuous supply of hair for said potion, Voldemort decapitates Harry and carries his head around with him. The logic here is that the Triwizard Tournament provided the perfect cover for this scheme, with the maze offering an ideal setting for Harry's murder. From there, Voldemort would masquerade as Harry and work to undermine the Order of the Phoenix. In doing so, he would break spirits, manipulate allies, and spread fear. Harry, in the eyes of his loved ones and allies, would effectively slowly descend into dark wizarddom, and after enough time, Voldemort would eventually reveal his true identity by putting Harry's decaying head on display. Let's just hope that he didn't pursue a relationship with Ginny. It seems a bit far-fetched and probably not all that necessary on Voldemort's part, but certainly some food for thought. Cedric's fate. A blast of green light blazed through Harry's eyelids, and he heard something heavy fall to the ground beside him. The pain in his scar reached such a pitch that he retched, and then it diminished. Terrified of what he was about to see, he opened his stinging eyes. Cedric was lying spread-eagled on the ground beside him. For a second that contained an eternity, Harry stared into Cedric's face, at his open grey eyes, blank and expressionless as the windows of a deserted house, at his half-open mouth, which looked slightly surprised. In the Goblet of Fire, we encounter a shocking and emotional moment as Harry grabs the Triwizard Cup portkey with one hand and touches Cedric's body with the other, transporting them both from the maze back to Hogwarts. The moment symbolizes Harry's loss of innocence and marks a turning point in the series. However, some fans of the series were quick to point out that they had seen no other instances of people traveling through a portkey indirectly, that is, via someone else holding onto them. In every other instance, a person could only be transported if they touched a portkey themselves. They can, however, bring along as many objects as they'd like. But if that's the case, how did Harry bring Cedric with him? The morbid theory suggests that because Cedric had died and his soul had left his body, he was no longer a person. And because his body was now just an empty container, Harry was able to transport Cedric's body as he would any other object. Dumbledore's dark plan. For those of you who may not know, an Obscurial is a young witch or wizard who is physically or emotionally abused to the point that they feel the need to repress their magic and hide their abilities. This repression is directly related to trauma experienced as a result of their magic and a development of hatred, fear, or shame in regard to their powers. These extremely negative emotions, combined with their attempt to suppress their magic, then turns into a parasitical force comprised of dark magic known as an Obscurus. Now you might be thinking, young wizard subjected to emotional and physical abuse? Sounds like Harry fits the bill. However, despite being subjected to all of this abuse over the years, Harry actually ended up being a pretty well-adjusted young boy. Sure, he wished he could have been raised in different circumstances, but the young Harry that we meet in the Philosopher's Stone doesn't seem to be too ashamed of who he is. Far from it. He actually seems quite sure of himself, aware that his relatives are silly and frivolous people, making friends with Ron before he even arrives at Hogwarts, turning away alliances with unkind wizards like Draco Malfoy, and asking the Sorting Hat not to place him in Slytherin. The other key component here is that Harry didn't ever have to repress his magical abilities because he never even knew he had them. Repressing one's magical abilities is potentially the most important part of an Obscurus forming. The Dursleys were too frightened of magic ever to acknowledge its existence to Harry, while Vernon and Petunia had a confused hope that if they were nasty enough to Harry, his strange abilities might somehow evaporate. They never taught him to be ashamed or afraid of magic. Even when he was scolded for making things happen, he didn't make any attempt to suppress his true nature, nor did he ever imagine that he had the power to do so. But here's the kicker. When handing Harry off to the Dursleys, Dumbledore never instructed them not to inform Harry of his magical heritage. In fact, the letter actually told the Dursleys to explain magic and his history to Harry at some point, which explains Hagrid's reaction when he learns that Harry knows nothing of his past. Therefore, Dumbledore likely assumed that at some point or another, Harry would learn of his magical heritage. But what Dumbledore also knew was that Vernon and Petunia Dursley were particularly awful people with a complete disgust of magic. People that in no way, shape or form would have supported Harry using it. Bearing all of this in mind, it stands to reason that Dumbledore may have been trying to turn Harry into an Obscurial. Dumbledore was fully aware of the imminent threat that was Voldemort, and it may be that he wanted to use Harry as a weapon in the event that Voldemort returned to power. This theory asserts that Dumbledore knowingly instructed Harry's emotionally abusive aunt and uncle to inform him of his magical heritage, despite knowing that suppressing magic produces a dark parasitic force. Just another example of creepy manipulation by Dumbledore in a world full of theories. Before you attack me in the comments, this is just a fun theory. Dumbledore is one of my favorite characters. And on that note, that concludes today's video. What do you think? Which theory seems most plausible to you? Let me know down in the comment section below. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.